Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is the SASCA podcast, and today we've got a special guest with us, Mr. Keenan Watson. Um, we also have Peter here still, as we have every week. So both of you, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
so
Martin. Welcome, Keegs.
yeah,
Thank
welcome.
you, Peter. Thank you, Don.
Yeah, so
It's good to
Keenan,
be here.
yeah, Keenan all the way from the Cape, Peter in Durban, myself in Pretoria. So we are representing 3 different provinces in our country at the moment. Peter has been experiencing the lovely South African environment, which we in Pretoria have experienced a few times. So he's got a lovely environment there, as you can see on his picture there, but also with a bit of power failure, power outages that they got last night. So anyway, that's why Peter is also in a nicer, more open environment today, not in his usual office environment or room
100%.
environment.
This should be
So-
my office, not. I should be out here in the sun next to the sea. That should be my normal office, but it's unfortunately not.
Technically, sometimes that is kind of your office, isn't it?
It's most of the time it is. It's
Yeah.
mostly time on the field, but some special occasions I sit outside and look at the bigger Durban. It's one of the best views in the country.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Keenan over here. He's going to give us a short introduction on himself and why he is. I know Keenan for quite a while now, and I know he's not very keen on talking about himself, but let's put him on the spot and see if he can give us a basic introduction, what he's about, what he enjoys doing, and so on. And then we're going to kick off with today's topic. Anyway, right, Keenan, let's go. Let's hear.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me on the show. Quite excited to be here. So, as Nod mentioned before, we've known each other since 2008 now. 2008. I met Nod when he was he's still currently there. But one day I walked into the HP gym one day and I just hear this guy, and I was like, holy smokes, who's this guy? And I was so scared for my life, but he was working with Alia that time. I think the guy BB Grade, and that's how our relationship started. So just a little bit of background of myself. As I'm at Keenan Watson, and been in the field for about 10 years, for a decade now. A former national athlete turned sports scientist or strength and conditioning coach, sports scientist. I've been working at the University of the Western Cape for about 7 years now. Alumni, obviously, and got my education there as well. And currently busy with my MSc at Setanta, College of Sport in Ireland. So, yeah.
Okay, you also did your MSc. I just completed that.
I don't think, I think. Awesome. Yeah, that's a nice. It's an awesome program, Peter.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's amazing.
Experience was about it.
No, but I promise you, it was amazing. It was in a difficult time. I just started before COVID, and obviously during all of that. And but the practical application of the course is amazing. The lectures and the knowledge is great. I would definitely recommend it for anyone. It is definitely one of those courses you need to do just to get a broader perspective of what S&C entails.
Yeah, definitely. That first day in already, I was like, I'm in love. Yeah, I think when we're in the sports science, strength and conditioning field, we don't like articles, we don't like writing up it. Yeah, but I mean, when you fall in love with research, I mean, it's like you said, practical and the academic perspective of it is the fact that they joined it. So it just takes it to the next level.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's the reason why I actually opted for the course, is that you can do a normal writing up thesis, but what is that? How is that going to upskill you in the field? Because we're in the trending field, like everything is just going forward, and unfortunately, you don't want to be left behind in the field. So it's a brilliant course to go to.
Awesome.
Right, so Keenan, at the moment, what sports are you working with at the university? If I remember correctly, last time we had a chat, I think it was still with the football, soccer? Still with them?
Yeah. So when I started there, I started with athletics, and then obviously my portfolio portfolio expanded a little bit. So I was in charge of, I think, 5 codes. So it's too many to mention, actually. And then, so I was, I think we started the high performance program in 2016, 2015 for the first time. And we had to play catch up, right? So obviously with new thought and new processes coming in, I was appointed as SNC or head SNC there in the department, and that's where I started with athletics, then moved into football. Was with football up until 2019. Jump on football, netball, and then fully integrated into those sporting codes, and the other sporting codes, like, we guided obviously, and to say this is how we do things, this is what changes are, this is your needs analysis, this is what your model looks like to improve. And then to 2020, obviously no sports. 2021, I joined the Varsity Cup team for season. We did really well there. After that, I decided, okay, I'm just going to take a break a little bit, and then went back to netball. This year I'm back with netball. I had all the other codes. Football, helped the female football a little bit in 2022. I think, and now I'm with netball and swimming. It's quite a good journey to be on with netball, because new coaching staff, new team members coming in, and just like with the course that I'm on, it's taking the approach much more to professional level with us. We are, unfortunately, we didn't make the varsity sports team, and we're down to Super B, but the rebuilding phase is something that we're looking forward to, because this year we've closed the gap with all our teams in varsity sports. We've improved 50%, about 50 to 55% against them regarding team scores. Where in the past we would lose about with 50, 40 points. Now we're losing with 15, 12, 8. So that's respectable, and we can see those performances. We got call-ups to the national teams and things like that. So those are small wins for the first season back, and just having a structured environment, we can put it like that.
Okay, no, awesome. It must be, this is not on today's topic, but I think this is also something we can maybe look into future reference, especially with Keenan, with your background. How difficult is it working with the different sports? So you've got you work with netball, swimming, soccer, athletics. How different, communicating with the athletes, and also looking at different cultures within sports. How difficult is it switching between that almost? Because then, if I find it difficult to work with athletes that run further than 800 meters if I'm working with athletics. So because there's a different culture if they're coming in and swim, whether it's swimming or running at a certain distance, it's a different culture you're working with. So it must be interesting working with those kind of sports and noticing the different cultures and how athletes in the different sports kind of operate and how they think. So how do you find that?
You're right. No, it's quite difficult, because you have to, the personalities is quite different. Like you said, any long distance or middle distance type of athlete, like when it comes to strength training, they're like, can you guys hear me? Sorry, my internet's a little bit bad. So like I said, and from a cultural perspective, it's like a lot of the coaches don't believe in strength training up until 2-3 years ago. So now you need to let them see, you allow them to fail, and then you come back, but you're still part of that process. But you have to groom the education around the coach, and you have to groom the athlete in terms of educating the athlete around it, and then slowly upskilling them and to say, come and observe the session. This is what we do, because even if it's evidence-based, things, and you coming from, hey, this exercise was research and this is what it's supposed to happen. Still, they don't. It's difficult to get the buy-in. So what I did was I will give the athlete and the coach the program. I would say, you guys try it out, and then you measure your times. Then when you're ready, we come back. Then we pick up the conversation. But I'm with them along that journey. If it's 6 weeks, if it's 8 weeks, I'm still with them in that journey. Always check in, coach, how's things going? How's this? How's that? How's the athlete responding? How's the times looking? And then they would actually see, hey, but we are changing. It is helping. It is. Can we have a conversation? Can you inform me about the benefits? Can you give me more information on the benefits? And I always use the NCAA, for example, and I say, you know what, the 800 from 800 to 1.5 or 400 to 1.5 nowadays, the guys are doing a hell of a lot of speed. They train like sprinters, So, and we need to, if we want to, and that's why they're so busy surpassing us. In the end, we didn't want to go in. We didn't want for 800 to 1.5 to 5,000. We didn't want to leave the country, but now the guys are leaving the country because the program is getting so much better. I mean, Oregon State is. I mean, they're producing now. Who's the other guys? UCLA, Texas State. I mean, Texas State is a sprinting university, but they're producing middle distance athletes now, and the guys are training like sprinters. And slowly but surely, we have been moving. That's athletics. Coming football. Football, for example, is if you don't play football, you don't understand the sport. Now, in 2019, we were like, okay, but we didn't have the most talented team, but we ended up top of the log in the varsity sports. I mean, and this is where this is one of the examples of using the topic that we want to speak about today. And all of a sudden it was a buy-in, and all of a sudden they see the benefits of strength training. They see the benefits of continuous structured programming. Rugby is in itself, it's a contact sport. The bigger you are, but how do we take that force that you're producing in the weight room, and how do we take that to the field? So letting the athlete understand that, letting the coach understand that is what's important, especially with the first thing that I would basically do with rugby was, what's your game plan? How do you want to play? Are you playing a structured game? Are you playing an unstructured game? And then according to those needs analysis, we'll be programmed, and then we always we would see, okay, the guys are stronger, the guys are not stronger, the guys are producing force. How many times do we need to sprint? Who's our carriers, for example? How fast are they? Are they contact? Are they dominant in contact? If they're not, why are they identified as carriers? That type of thing. So yeah, it's quite it's like a split personality. You have to be schizophrenic. Basically, yeah. If I can put it like that, you change the way you talk, the way you approach.
Yeah,
sometimes you have to be hard. Sometimes, especially with females. With females nowadays, that's quite. What I found interesting is that you can speak to a female or to the female athletes, and you can tell them, listen, here, this is how it's supposed to be, and they will give you the 100%. And then with the male athletes, it's more of an ego thing. I need to trust you, my dude, and that's what's important. It's like you can speak to them, but you lose them. But once you lose them, it's a fight to lose them before they can actually come back into the session again.
Yeah.
You have to win them back actually. But with females, it's like, guys, we're here to work. Let's work. Okay, cool. How do you want us to work? And that is quite interesting to see nowadays, because especially on the female sports is becoming competitive. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's awesome.
So I ranted a little bit.
No, but that answers it really well. I think we'll definitely arrange at some point have a talk about buy-in, and then obviously having a talk about working with different sports, because it's inevitable to, and a lot of people, I think, especially if there's any up-and-coming strength conditioning coaches, sports scientists listening to the podcast, it's important to understand that you might be doing strength conditioning, or you might be doing sports science, which is always sports science, always strength conditioning. And you can have two different sports that's got similar qualities that you want to achieve and want to get, but they've got different cultures and different ways of doing it. So I call it language. So you have to speak football, and you have to speak rugby, and you have to speak swimming. Swimmers, one of the things in terms of, like, this is literally language that they use, is they'll be talking a lot about tapering. A lot of other sports don't talk about tapering, so it's taper, and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, there's certain things that's in the language, but certain things is not necessarily in the actual language that is part of the language that you need to be able to be different with the different sports. So that'll be an interesting thing. But today's thing will be, we're going to be talking about maximum aerobic speed and the speed reserve, and how you use that in conditioning with the athletes that you're working with. So yeah, so I don't know where you want to start. You want to maybe start at, what do you do for testing for this, and how's your structure? How do you get this going, basically? Let me start it there.
So when we start, everybody heard this thing about maximum aerobic speed, and not everybody knew how to start it. And then they saw templates online and things like that. And then there's this one guy, Nathan Healy, that I always step into. He's in Australia. He's an expert in this field, and that he gave me a better understanding, or they gave me a better understanding. Sorry, I'm dropping names here. I'm supposed to, but just for research purposes, because so. And the first thing is to understand what maximum aerobic speed, what's trying to achieve, and that's the fastest speed at which a subject was able to run for at least 30 seconds to elicit the VO2 max response. Okay, and which is the gold standard for aerobic conditioning, because a lot of the guys regarding, like you said earlier, chaos. You come in, you run 20 meters for 10, and they would think we're doing aerobic conditioning, which is not true. So how I structured it is, I would look at the different testing protocol that's out there, like your yo-yo, your the bleep, what is the other one, the mass test itself, the 30-15 football test, and that's part of my needs analysis, and what is the demands of the sporting code. Is a yo-yo test good, for example, and it's found that there's two ways you approach it. That for certain specific tests, such as your time trials and things, it's good for endurance athletes, and then the yo-yo test is good for change of direction athletes. But then you also have to look at the validity and the reliability of the test. So what I use is basically the yo-yo test. It is good for. It's not good for change of direction, but it's good for VO2 max speed. Because that's the response we want. We want that response.
Yeah.
So a lot of be like, yes, we're doing this because the template says that we need to do it. We need to understand where it's coming from as well. So so there's a strong correlation between the yo-yo intermittent recovery test 1 with regarding to VO2 max, right? But it is not a good or reliable determination for mass, if that makes sense.
Yes, I know. I'm with you.
So I would usually use the yo-yo test because I want the aerobic capacity. I want the response of the VO2 max thing, and then the mass test itself, the combination of the mass test itself, like taking distance between the metric and getting basically your speed and things like that. So the best one was the 30-15 football test. It was created by Martin Boucher. So it's quite popular and is valid and reliable determination for mass. But the test overestimates VO2 max at so 100% of 30/15 equals 120% of your mass.
Okay.
Yeah. So and the implication is on the training prescription basically. So you'll find a guy that's really unfit, and then but this is so easy. You're at 97% to it, of your mass, but you can't cope. But he's actually running then at 110 to 115% of his mass, and that is where we're coming from. So, the mass test is quite difficult to administer though. So, to determine that is you need to use it to see if there's a correlation, and what do you want to achieve during that time, and that is definitely what we're looking at when we look at aerobic conditioning. Yeah.
So just one thing, maybe just give a quick talk through of the mass test, and then just maybe so we can just elaborate on, because a lot of the times it's awesome to do great tests and that, but it's not always practical in the environment. So just maybe some of the challenges with that, and then just talk us through, like, for someone, might be people that's going to have to stop this and Google what that is. So just a basic explanation so they have a better idea, and then maybe just before we move to the next part.
Yeah. So the mass test is basically a cone at every 25 meters. So you start at 10 kilometers, 10 kilometers per hour. So basically a time. So you give them a time over 25 meters, and then you increment that time, and then you continue doing it until they must be inside 2 meters of the cone.
Okay.
So if they don't make it inside for 3 consecutive times, that's the distance that you take from there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then so it's quite difficult to administer in big groups. If it's
for sure, yeah.
So it's not popular.
Yeah. So if you have big groups, you're probably going to have some individuals assisting with the administering of the test or execution of the test. It's not a test that you can, if you have, let's say you have 70 athletes that you have to take through the test, it's going to be difficult to do it with being one sports scientist or one S&C running through the whole group, and it's probably going to have to do multiple sessions for the test if you're going to be doing that way. So that could be some limitations. Okay.
Cool. So but it is quite valid, and so the nice thing about it is that if you finish the inside that, if it's half in terms of termination, you can add like 0.5, because remember you have to add a kilometer, so you have to add what is that? Kilometer. The kilometer for mass is 3.6. All right.
Yeah, I think so.
No. But so one meter per second is equal to 3.6. If I'm right. Is that right? Kilometers, 3.6 kilometers. Yeah.
Math not my
strong
suit.
There we go.
Spreadsheets, yes.
Spreadsheets. There we go. So so that's what I would look at and going forward. But the most important thing is to understand what you want to achieve with your testing and with mass itself. And I think you want to achieve how you can condition the athlete or get the athlete to sustain VO2 max capacity at the longest rate possible. And I think that's the important tool for that type of conditioning. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then, so if you've done the test and you've determined the athlete's maximum aerobic speed, so you have a value for that, what's your next step that you go into then?
So the next step then would be obviously the program. So where do we start? What do we look at? What type of are we going to use long mass running, or are we going to do short heat interval running, or short heat change of direction, or short super maximal running, and that's where the anaerobic speed comes in. It's going to we can, how can I say, we'll speak about that a little bit later.
Okay.
And yeah, so I think the most important thing is what they found with mass is that heat training is the best way to go. And when we say heat training, there's that short aerobic phase, short aerobic heat, and then there's short aerobic heat with change of direction. So that's basically your guideline in terms of, because if you don't have a track, you can't give the guys to say, listen here, or the girls to say, hey, you need to do 197 meters in 45 seconds. You know,
Yeah.
So you need to go look at the what you have and where do you start. And they found is that we always use all three all energy systems at the same time. So with aerobic, we're still looking at conditioning your anaerobic system as well, you know. So from there, I would look at my demands and where my players at, and what's my level of player. Because if it's a novice player, I'm not going to give them a short aerobic hit with change of direction. But my senior player, I'm going to say, okay, you guys have done this already, so this is your core group, and then I will take care of the younger group itself. Because again, player maturity is very important. You don't want injuries, you don't want things like that to happen. And which is quite weird, because I found that if you start too fast even with aerobic work, that you get a creatine kinase response, and the guys are sore for days. You know,
especially beginning. I mean, obviously when they're unconditioned. Yeah, unconditioned.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unconditioned, yeah. And I mean, 90% of your first years come in, they're unconditioned because they don't have the system, because they're not exposed to this at the high school level. You know, and it's quite good to have this actually, because the guys that listening in can then you start using it, because sometimes they're afraid to use mass and because they don't understand it. But
for sure, yeah.
So after that, then we would have identified a 16-week block of mass conditioning. Sometimes we go 12, some depending on the season and when we start. Yeah, and also the demands, because our short super maximal hit is good to do in season as a conditioning top up or as a aerobic top up. I've also found that a lot of coaches are scared to do that in season. But it's actually, if you do it right and you do it the right way, it will actually be good. Yeah, we can it has its benefits.
Yeah.
You know,
and also it's part of load management, and then it's about, you're not going to do that in season with a group of athletes that you didn't work with before the season. So if you did a pre-season with them and you worked from pre-season through to in season, then you can do those kind of things because you've obviously prepared them for that.
Yeah.
The problem comes in when someone, I think with a lot of coaches, what they might have experienced or what they might have heard of is coaches just throwing that in randomly because they heard it'll work, and then they throw it into players that's not used to the load. So it's not necessarily the load, it's the road to load. That's the thing. That's the problem. So
and now what I found was that with that approach, the players lose mass. They lose mass during preseason incident if you just randomly start throwing it in, because they overdistance the things. They do overdistance. They would go 7 kilometers, you know, or 7,000 meters.
You
know, and not time based wise, because you're still getting high speed running but you're overdoing it. Now you are going into that fat burning zone. You're going into where you're dropping off water. You're using certain things, and the recovery, they're not skilled for, and to say, hey, your recovery needs to be this. You've ran this was your metabolic load, and this is the amount of nutrients you need to put back into your system. And they just let the guys go. And when they come back, give me 2-3 weeks. And I mean, like, what's up? You've lost 5 kgs in what, 3.5 weeks? What the hell is happening here? Then you start panicking,
Yeah.
And the first person who's on the chopping block is your SNC.
For sure.
Yeah. So yeah. So why HIIT not? The peer-reviewed literature advocates the use of HIIT is to improve fitness when compared to continuous training, right? And it supports the notion that HIIT with intermediate or advanced athletes is a much more effective option in terms of eliciting and reducing aerobic fitness improvement.
So sorry to interrupt. So just have to ensure that everyone understands that we are mostly talking about team sports and those type of effects. Yes. Am I right? We're not talking about someone preparing for the Comrades Marathon.
No. Sorry, yeah. So
we just have to just have to make sure we that everyone understands that. Yeah, this is going to be in terms of preparation for an intermittent type sport. Yes. Okay.
The intermittent type sport. Yes. Yeah. So such as your rugby, such as your football. Sorry. And that's why I mentioned earlier that if it's endurance, like the different tests for endurance, that you can use mass for. Like your time trials is for your endurance athletes.
For sure.
And then your yo-yo and your bleep and your 30-15 is more for your intermittent sport codes, team sport codes. Yeah. So and if we look at the application of it, right, in team sport, is that it influenced the and this is what I found from using it, is that it influenced the conditioning of the athletes very positively, because they are sore for 3-4 weeks. They adapt very quickly to it, and the recovery session RPE from week 1 to week 3 comes down, and the work rate goes up, and that is what you want.
Yeah.
And in safer time frames, in safer how can I say, in a safer environment, because creating decreasing injury risk at the time for them. So and then if we look at classifying, HIIT, what HIIT is, or high intensity training is, and again, we have HIIT in the fitness world.
And you have HIIT on Instagram.
And you have HIIT on Instagram.
Which, it's not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same. Yeah. So so this is still with maximum aerobic training. Is that we have long high intensity training, which is more than 1 minute at a constant speed, right? And or at near VO2 max. So the intensity range 85 to 100, 105%. But what they found with this is that it takes too long. It takes too long to be there, and the athlete can only sustain it for about 12 minutes at a time. And then so what they looked at was shorter version of it.
Okay.
And more repetitions, because you're running at VO2 max levels. You want to have a response at VO2 max, and it takes about 2 minutes to get into that response. So if you do it too long with no active recovery, you're depleting, or you're hitting that so quickly. So the response is actually not very good, if you know what I mean, because 12 minutes, but you're playing an 80-minute game.
For sure.
Yeah.
Or 90 if it's soccer, yeah.
Or 90 if it's soccer, yeah. And then we get short HIIT aerobic, which is less than a minute. So that is where you start. That is where I would start. And the benefits of that is you start at 95 to 105 of your mass training, right?
So kind of working from rather starting shorter and then from shorter building up to longer. Does that make, is that what you, yeah. So very much like similar to some of what some sprint coaches will do. Some sprint coaches will also, if they do sprints, they'll start with short and work up to long. Some do the other way around. But I mean, that's it's same concept or idea as such.
So
Okay.
So what is good is like a lot of the guys would use the long hits, which is not bad. But I found that the shorter one is more controlled, the shorter aerobic, because you can have controlled distances. So if it's a 45 seconds, then we can add, if you don't have a track to run on, or if you don't have a big field to run on, we can literally say, okay, cool. So we are going to work for 45 seconds and we need to achieve this distance. So luckily I have a wheel that I can measure it out. And I say from that cone to that cone, you need to be there in 45 seconds. You know, and that's it. That is for the aerobic conditioning to start off. So it's your work ratio in this influences the sortie type and intensity. So your work to rest ratio is 45 to 15. So it's a 3-to-1 type of ratio.
Okay.
That you want to get that response, or you can go 2-to-1 depending on your sport type and your athlete that you're working with. If it's an advanced athlete, you can basically, you can say 2-to-1. If it's a novice athlete, we can start slower. And that is what I found with once you start introducing a new athlete to this, well, you introduce this to it's a new stimulus for an athlete. I find that the 3-to-1 version or the work option is much better and controlled. Just an example, I've worked the one girl or one female athlete that I work with, super fit, super fit lady. And we started with a 3-to-1 ratio. She couldn't finish the first session.
Because fit, but not necessarily like that.
Yeah, fit, but not necessarily like that. And but by week 10, she was flying. She was like, I want more. Give me more. This is too easy. And it's like, but you remember, it's not speed endurance. It's not anaerobic building. It is aerobic capacity building. So what we found there was increasing our work repetition duration beyond the rest duration by the work to rest ratio manipulation. The responses was increased aerobic energy requirement, and also increased time at near VO2 max. So we could go longer, we could add more reps the longer we went, and that was good to see, because that gave them the confidence to, when it's time for skills training, to put more intent behind that skill training. And we went into the weight room, our sessions went from an hour to hour 15 down to 45 minutes. So the recovery, it helped a lot with the recovery and things like that. So that is quite positives that I found. The negatives what I found with that is that it is repetitive and it becomes monotonous to some athletes. And they're like, again today. What is new? What is, and then you need to change it up a little bit. And then after that, we would go into what we call week 4, so 4 to 4, we would do the short aerobic HIIT training, and then week again, depending whether we need 4 weeks, whether we need 6 weeks. Then from there we would go into the next phase, which is our short HIIT change of direction, because it's a change of direction sport that we work in. So we need to focus on the eccentric phase of deceleration, right? So, which is a good thing, and that is what I found, is that it does help the change of direction the fact that you have to decelerate, also load the play eccentrically. And once we start with doing the speed work, it's so much better for them to accelerate, decelerate, and change of direction. Especially with netball, for example, is that what I found with them is that because we need to move into between 1.5 to 3 meters space, and we need to evade 2 to 3 people, and that is what I found that we can repeat. We can repeat it longer.
Okay.
To change of direction, because it's an error. Yeah.
So the mass change of direction, how do you implement that? I mean, is that let's say, for example, if you're still working on you still work on a 45 second and work 15-second rest, for example, would you just same distance and then just add more change of directions in there, or how would, I mean, how's your practical application of the change of direction? There's an example for a just give us an example.
It's the same. It's the same. The change of direction is exactly the same. It's exactly the same.
Okay.
The only difference is the change of direction. So if it's 100 meters, you go up 50, come back 50.
Okay. So one change of direction, basically,
70,
straightforward. Okay.
Straightforward. One change of direction. Sometimes we shorten the distance, and say, okay, now before we go into supramaximal phase, we go 2 changes of direction. So we go tap, so now we're starting to condition them to respond a little bit, because now the next phase would be your supramaximal heat, where you're running that supramaximal phases. And that's a little bit higher, because now there's a lactic response as well. But if they're not pre-exposed to those movements, they're going to struggle.
Yeah.
And I found, like, man, it's rare cases where a hammy goes, but again, that's then we go look at the profile of the athlete and say, okay, but you did show a little bit of extra work here. You've done some stuff on your own, and you are a little bit overtrained, not from us.
Coming in with pre-existing pathology, almost, if you can put it like that. You get some athletes coming in, new athletes coming in with a pre-existing problem. I might not be 100% aware of it, and they keep quiet. That's part of the things. Looking at the profile, for example, you could probably, if you go back sometimes beforehand, it's not always easy to determine if this is going to be a problem or not, because it's small. And then if you look back, you say, okay, so we did see that bit of a tight hip flexors. We are starting to work on that. So it's one of it happens. So we can reduce the risk of, we can't reduce injuries, but you can reduce the risk of injury. So we don't have a crystal ball yet. So but we're trying to get as close as possible.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so just coming back to the change of direction, if I can, if I can share a bit of periodization considerations now, is that the repeated acceleration and the intermittent nature of the exercises, it increases your recruitment patterns, right? So via your acceleration requirements, to get up to the prescribed speeds. And what I mean with that is that your movement that you're doing in terms of the change of direction is that you're forcing because you're forcing other movement qualities to respond to the intended need for the speed where I want you to be. So that's a nice thing to for an athlete to see, because I don't see a netball player, I don't see a soccer player, I see an athlete. And when I look at that athlete, my intent for the athlete is to respond like an athlete. And a lot of the like I said again, culture and mindset that I have dealt with is that I'm a football player. No, I don't have to do this. I don't need to do this. But when we actually start doing it, and then you can see there's an increase in this eccentric loading. So my deceleration quality is much better. because my body is used to it. I've adjusted and I've adapted to it. I can produce more force at acceleration when I have to step off. I brake much faster. And I'm actually quite, the reason why I'm mentioning braking is I'm quite excited. The guys are busy putting out new research in terms of calculating deceleration and things like that. And I'm quite excited to see that, but mass is where it starts. Yeah.
Yeah.
If it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good starting point. I mean, it's it's a good starting point because that's the beginning of running. So if you kind of, let's say, no one ever really starts from scratch, but let's say if you start from scratch, it's a good position to start from and build up gradually according to the adaptation very nicely to get to a point where you're doing it at a top level, top speed, top acceleration, top deceleration. Fits in quite nicely with your background that you got there as well. So we just
So moving along in terms of the short maximal heat, and that is they found that when you move into this zone of training, coaches always over prescribe distances, because for example, athlete A and athlete B, it's not the same athlete, so the max aerobic speed is different, so the velocities are different. So for example, I work with someone that has a mass of 4.5, just for example, and the other athlete has 4, F5, they have 5. So obviously, if I have to prescribe that in the same group, the athlete A is not going to make that session, but athlete B with the 5 meters per second will be able to make that session. So now this player is overworking himself. So athlete A is neurally fatigued. He starts becoming fatigued. And what it did was we actually went on and we took the maximum speed over 30 meters, right? And then we converted that into getting an anaerobic speed reserve. And how we do that was we took I just want to get that calculation up. So we took the player's speed, max speed, and then we minus it from the player's mass times 3.6, and then you get the anaerobic speed reserve. So for example, a player would have a max speed of 32 kilometers per hour, which is quite fast, over 30 meters. Then you would minus that from you would take that, you first times it, your mass 4.5, example 4.5 times 3.6, because you have to convert, and then you minus it from the max speed. So it would be, for example, 32 minus the mass times 3.6 would give you then 15.8 and speed reserve of the athlete. And what they found with that knot is that it bridges the gap. It bridges the gap between the athlete that has 5 meters per second versus 4.5, because athlete A might be faster than athlete B, but athlete B has a better endurance capacity than athlete A, genetically. And then
so this is now the speed reserve calculated together with your maximum aerobic speed to get a better to gauge better where your individual athlete is at. So you can use mass to individualize. You're really doing that, but now to get it even further, so mass is kind of geared for endurance, and you want to do 1 million intervals with all your athletes now. But if you add the mass, or if you have your speed reserve calculated into that with the formula that you did now, you can almost determine from, correct me if I'm wrong, then you'll be able to determine if you have a more speed-orientated athlete or a more endurance-orientated athlete.
There we go.
Right.
Yeah. So that's good. That's great.
And then what they found is your speed orientated or sprint type athlete that's more sprint speed orientated recovers slower, kind of. So that makes sense.
Yeah. And and then, but we don't use for example, we would get 15.28 kilometers, 15.8 kilometers per hour of that athlete that I just mentioned now. But then we use a percentage. So the gold standard for using it in the super maximal, it is it's 100 of your mass plus 30% of your anaerobic speed reserve. That's the gold standard that they found.
Okay.
And the reason why is that the mass plus 20 wasn't on par with the distance. So you could get the similar distance between using your yo-yo interval recovery distances versus your mass plus 30%, and they could actually go for longer. So it's not long, it's actually there's a correlation of 0.99 or 0.97. Okay, we won't get 0.99, but it's about 0.97 in terms of the correlation between the yo-yo versus the mass plus 30% of your anaerobic speed reserve. So once they've done that, we would move into basically our play and things like that, and we would maintain that that anaerobic capacity, because you want to build it during the season. It's not too taxing, but it can be used as an aerobic top-up during the season, and you can do it year-round. But it's also dependent on where you're going to. If it's a rugby, obviously we don't want to top up too much. If it's football, we want to top up a lot. If it's netball, we will focus a little bit more on anaerobic power in that season to maintain it from there. So this work to rest ratio is basically 1:3. Now we're reversing it. So if you work 15, so if you work 15, we rest 30.
Yeah.
If you go faster, we can go even up to 1 to 4. We work 15, we rest a minute, and that depends on how much in terms of effort, obviously, distance that you need to cover, and also the amount of change of directions that you want in there. And that's quite nice to see, because again, your athlete is exposed to high speed running of the match demand without hitting maximal speed. Because just if you have a if you have a question.
So what you're in essence doing by having your mass value and your speed reserve value and using the formula and taking it like that, what in essence is happening is, because many years ago, before all this happened, people that I worked with, and when I worked with teams and that, so we're talking about 15 years ago, around about there. So I'll do basic testing, and I get to know the athletes. So then I see, okay, so this guy, and I can go to the coach, say, listen, coach, this guy can play 80. You can make him play 80 every week, and he's going to be awesome, right?
Yeah.
This guy, you can't make him play 80. He's going to die.
Yeah.
He has to play 60, maybe 30. So you either start him for 60 or 50 minutes, or you play him off the bench for 30, because that's where you're going to get the best out of him, right? So and you'll get prop forwards, heavy, big guys. You'll get some prop forwards. Most props do not want to play the full game, but some props can, because they've got a diesel engine. They can just go and go and go. Then you get other prop forwards. I would go as far as to say Oxenchef, for example. He's really big, he's really heavy, but he's also really explosive. And he's really explosive. So that inherently tells me that he would have a a larger kind of speed reserve than what you would expect. But that would inherently mean that if I just work with mass and leave the speed reserve out, he's going to take a hammering with that. And this, if I take the speed reserve into consideration, he'll be able to cope better with, it'll be a more accurate value of what he should be running within his intervals. Okay. So that's kind of a calculated way of being able to test an athlete and determine a better capacity for work that he has got. And most likely, irrespective of level of fitness or conditioning that the athlete might have, this will be a predetermined genetic kind of factor almost, you can say.
Yeah.
So to a large extent, yes, everyone can get fitter and stronger, but if you have Usain Bolt, he's going to be extremely fast, but he will not win the comrades.
Yeah.
No matter what you do. No matter what you do, he's not going to win the Comrades Marathon. He's never going to win it unless he shoots everyone else that he runs against. And he'll probably also not win because he's probably not going to make it even.
Yep, exactly. So, and he's going to hate it after the first kilometer.
100%. So I mean, irrespective of how hard he works and all that kind of thing, so you have some genetic physical makeup that's going to determine this. And this is, in the way I see it, this is an easy way, and well, not necessarily easy, but it's a good way, and it's probably one of the best ways at the moment to be able to ensure that you are conditioning each athlete at the correct level where they should be as best as possible. So, because you like I said, you will have some athletes in team sports, you need various athletes. Yeah. I know with sevens, for example, before this, like once again, 20 years ago, Ashley Everett, and then when he was working there, so Ashley Everett's still there. I remember when he was working in the early days working there, they didn't necessarily test specific, but they'll take a guy for a trial for a week. And even beforehand, coaches will say, listen, this guy is going to be amazing at sevens. And then just from watching him play previously, they would say, listen, yes, he's super fast, but he's probably not going to make sevens. Yeah. Like, no, he's fast. It's like, yes, but can he do it repeatedly and not die?
Yeah.
Because you get some of the guys, sevens, for example, if you use rugby, gets the ball, runs a 50-meter try, he's done.
Yeah. He's done. He's
done.
Yeah. National League, musical play, National League rules.
He's done. He has to be taken off. Then you get some other guys, they can do it 5 times in a row. They'll be fine. They're going to be tired, but they can carry on like that. And this test will basically be able to give you a value on how much or where the athlete is with regards to that specific capacity, and then be able to train him accordingly. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, right.
Yeah, that's awesome exactly needed on it.
Awesome tool to have, and an awesome thing I think that people should incorporate, as opposed to using the pulling out of a hat concept of conditioning. Do you know that concept?
Yeah. It's like you come and you run and you throw up.
That's basically just some really tough random drill, and you just run until you can't anymore. So that's the one extreme of the continuum, and then this is on the other end where you have a much more controlled, much more scientific way, and a much more individualized way of doing it. So so this is brilliant.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So I mean, it's good to have, but if we can just go back to the one thing we didn't mention was like the sets and reps. You know, a lot of people would go, as I mentioned, a lot of in your training, you can actually schedule it either before or after. You know, the legs are fresh, or if you want the place to be fatigued, especially with the super maximal, when you get into a super maximal phase, you want it in a fatigue state, you want a place to respond in a fatigue state, or in a fresh state, you know. And the repetitions, set repetitions, it's simple. It's 2 sets, 8 reps. You know, you get your distances. The same thing with the short aerobic, 2 sets, 8 reps. Sometimes if I really see the guys are hiding behind, you know, they're lazy. They're not, you know, they're just like 2 sets, 8 reps. We just need to go through. Then I add another 2, you know, add another 2 reps. You know, the first 2 didn't count. It was warm up. So you manipulate it as you go along, and also time in terms of the distances. And the reason why I mentioned that not is because in the short aerobic phase, what they tried to do was if you're continuously running, as you mentioned, someone comes, guys, we're gonna run for 10 minutes continuously. They found that a player can only run, or an athlete can only run for 8 minutes continuously at maximal velocity, especially if it's in the sport. This was in hockey, and female hockey. A player can only run for 8 minutes continuously. We at 100% mass. We do short supra maximal burst. You can go up to 24 minutes.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's a lot. It's quite a bit more. A lot more work capacity getting in there.
Getting in there, and then you get a better response to that. Because now the athlete comes and they like, oh, we're going to run continuously. So a session is just 8 minutes. So what do we do now? Or a session is just 12 minutes. What do we do now?
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
So and then we have terms such as passive recovery and active recovery, and especially with the short again, I'm talking around supramaximal again, is that they found anything between 30 seconds and under is a good enough range to not decrease heart rate or oxygen consumption, because you don't want to decrease heart rate. You want to keep it. You want to be in that state to get the aerobic response. So it means, so what it is it's not a opportune time for significant decrease in heart rate or oxygen consumption. So active recovery is again a minimum of 50% of your mass. So you have passive recovery, and then so, for example, 2 sets of 8 reps. This example that I have in front of me is now this one is with short aerobic. 2 sets of 8 reps, 45 seconds of 97% or 97.5% of mass with 15% passive recovery.
Okay.
Understand? So we don't usually use a lot of active recovery, but I mean in rugby we would use that as an option maybe, because it's a fartlek sport. I see rugby as a fartlek sport.
It is very much. It is very much.
Yeah. So so that is why we. So those are the resting modalities, as well as your when you're setting up a set, for example, with mass, you can go a little bit further. We can go 4 sets of 8 reps and times 15 seconds, depending on what level of player you at, you're working. And you can sorry. Yeah, so the gold standard is your 120. The gold standard is 120, but they found that the 100% plus the 30% anaerobic speed reserve is a much better option. And you will find that 120% of your mass is available everywhere in literature. But it's very little. Anaerobic speed reserve is very limited to that, because the guys, what's the one sprinter's name? Sprints coach, is a speeds coach in the States. Lee or someone. But he uses this a lot in his programs, in his L programs and things like that. And we always ask ourselves, how is it that these guys have this repeatability of, and I mean, this is one way to look at it. And yeah, I've seen positive results with with the players. And again, if I can, I know it's about 4 years ago, 2019. With football, we didn't have the best team of talented players, but we ended up in the knockout rounds. And it's not big, and we started off slow. We lost our first 2 matches, but others started dropping. Our performances started going up, and that is what we want. We could predict exactly where we're going to have a very good game, and we could predict where we're going to have a really crappy game, and and that is one of the nice things when using this as a tool in terms of aerobic conditioning. Because for me, it's that again, athlete, we're working with an athlete, and you want to develop the athletic structure or the athletic qualities of a player, and not as an athlete, and as not as a player in that specific sport.
I think technically what it comes down to is, as the strength conditioning coach, we work with athletic qualities and athletic and physical qualities of the player. And we, like you mentioned in the beginning, is you do your needs analysis, you've got the whole process you go through in terms of what is the physical attributes that is needed to perform the sport. And if you have different game plans, might have different physical attributes that'll be more prominent. And if you have different ways of going about it, you need certain physical attributes to do that. And that's kind of like the strength conditioning coach's job to try and get that developed as best as possible. My job is not to, if I'm working with rugby players, my job is not to make a better rugby player. I'm not a rugby coach. So to make a better rugby player, he needs to be able to pass the ball really well under a lot of pressure and under a lot of stress in various situations. That's one thing. If he's a prop forward, he needs to be able to scrum. So there's certain techniques and angles and everything that needs to be done in scrum. I can make him extremely strong for scrums, but I'm not going to coach him how to scrum. I'm not going to coach him how to pass. So I don't make him a better rugby player. I make him a more explosive, faster, stronger, more mobile rugby player. That's what I do. So same with any kind of sport, and that's how I see it. And some guys seem to miss the point when it comes to that. So try and create better canoeists, better tennis players in the gym. When you're actually supposed to make a more physically superior athlete for the sport, and that's I think that's the key thing, and this is one of the tools to be able to do that.
It's one of the various tools, or it's a small tool, but it's a good thing to have. You don't get diminishing returns. Everything is quite positive, I haven't found anything or a team with diminishing returns. I don't know if you can hear the little one crying in the background.
No. You must say the mic is doing quite a good job of hiding any kind of background sounds there.
Also. So if there's so that's in a nutshell, not that's mass training with anaerobic speed reserve in consideration. There's a I think we can go on for hours and hours if with regarding with just on this specific topic. I think to cover, we can always come back to this to delve into a little bit more in terms of literature and from the academic perspective. I mean, you're an academic yourself, and a brilliant one at it. So I think by the time we come back to this, you're going to say, Keenan, not that, but this.
Right. 100%. No, we're definitely going to revisit this because there's a lot more we can talk about. But I think this is a great place, great starting point. Like almost everything we've discussed thus far on the podcast. Just realized as I've been doing this that there's quite a lot we can cover, quite a lot we can chat about. Hopefully, if the viewers find it interesting as well. That would be nice. At the moment, I'm loving this and I'm enjoying it. So that's the main thing for me at the moment. And if there's, there must be other people also who's going to be enjoying this. So and getting a lot of value out of it. So I think today's one is great value. There's definitely going to be some people watching this. They'll get some great value out of it. I know a lot of the interns that I'm working with will get great value out of this. So they're not just hearing me blab on about stuff. It's also hear that someone else in the industry and what they're doing and how we're going about this. So this has been fantastic.
Yeah, thanks. So, so and another thing before we leave, before I don't know what's happening next. I don't want to assume things, but what I can think is that we can have comparison with with previous seasons in terms of high speed running averages when we get into that. So we can just an example. What it's a positive tool to one of the positive to use this tool is that we know exactly from 2023 or 2001, our players averages this amount of high speed running per match. So now we're training at that capacity. We're not overcooking things, but they're comfortable here. So which means our high speed running for this year is going to be much, much more. And that will also assist the coaches to say, we're getting those numbers. Let's focus on putting our game plans around these because that's the capacity of our athletes. Sure, they can do this. So
it's also important. Yeah, that's very important.
So, again, game modeling and things like that.
For sure.
Because I mean, I used it a lot.
The environment that you're in, and the university environment, you're not always. If you can use the Bulls as an example, that 2000, around about 2000 when Heineke Meyer got in there, he had a specific game plan that he wanted to play, and he could go and recruit the players that's going to fit the game plan, and they could recruit them at a young age and develop the players into the game plan that he wanted. So that's right, but not everyone's got that luxury of recruiting the kind of players. So you also have to be able to see, listen, this is the players that we do have. So if we can do this kind of game plan, this will probably work quite a bit better with what we do have at the moment. If we have all skinny, fast players, we're probably not going to play a massive game of physicality and mauls and stuff like that. So then we have to adapt to that, and then we have the numbers to work with that, and then we make that as best as possible. We make that our great attribute.
Attribute, definitely.
So that's awesome,
And that's another topic that we can speak on one day.
No, 100%,
so so many things that we can speak on, and I mean, I think the success, the reason, because it comes from maximum aerobic speed comes from football, I think, originally. And I mean, if you look at what's the guy's name, Jose Mourinho. To add this with his tactical periodization, he knew exactly where he was going to with his with the performance of his athletes, and we tried it again. I tried it with the football team. We got that results, and that I could confidently say we knew exactly when and where and how. If we had to push a team for in extra time 120 minutes, we knew the last 5 minutes we were going to score. Or if they have to go to penalties, we knew our goalkeepers were better conditioned to take penalties. That's why a lot of teams were afraid to go penalties against us.
For sure.
And so I think it's a very good tool to have. I'm not advocating say, hey, this is the must-have. I'm saying try it out.
For sure, as opposed to the conditioning out of a hat tool. You don't want that. But listen, so Keenan, this has been awesome, and I think the viewers are going to get some great value from this. Once again, if any questions, you can pop it into the comments. I usually leave the email for the association there as well. So guys, you can email if you have any questions, any things that you want to have answered, then we can maybe cover that in a podcast in the future as well. So anyway, awesome. Thank you very much, Keenan. Thanks for being here. And listen, thanks for some great advice, great information that you shared with us. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nat. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. Have a good one.
Yes, same to you. Bye-bye.